I'm John Strum, and this is RealTalk MS. It's July 30th, and we have a lot to talk about. Less than 2 weeks ago, the National MS Society announced the appointment of Dr. Tim Coetzee as its new president and CEO, with the MS Society's board chair, Peter Porrino, commenting, and I'm quoting now, "Tim is a trusted voice of the global MS community, a highly respected scientist, and we're excited for him to bring his transformative leadership to drive us into our next era to achieve a world free of MS." End quote. I thought it was important for everyone in the RealTalk MS listener community to hear from Tim and learn firsthand what his vision and priorities are for the MS Society. So I'm dedicating this entire episode to my conversation with the new president and CEO of the National MS Society, Dr. Tim Coetzee. About 10 days ago, the National MS Society named Dr. Tim Coetzee as its new president and CEO. This role caps Dr. Coetzee's 24-year career with the MS Society, having most recently served as the Society's Chief Advocacy Services and Science Officer. If you're a regular listener, you've heard Dr. Coetzee join this podcast many times, but this is the very first time that I can say joining me is the president and CEO of the National MS Society, Dr. Tim Coetzee. Congratulations and welcome back to the podcast, Tim.
Well, hey, John, it's great to be back with your audience, and thank you. I'm just thrilled to join you in this new role and to talk about the opportunities ahead.
It's an election year in the United States, and I'm reminded that newly elected presidents will often announce the priorities they plan to focus on during their first 100 days in office. So if we can borrow from that example, what are your priorities for your first 100 days as the National MS Society's president and CEO?
Great question. And, I think let me take us back a shade, and then if you can, I can go forward to where I want to go. One of the aspects about starting this role is that, I've had opportunity to reflect on who is the National MS Society and, what we've accomplished in the now almost 80 years since Sylvia Lowry placed that ad in the New York Times asking, will anybody who's been recovered from MS get in contact with her? And as I've thought more about that, one of the aspects about that is that, the way I think about it is that when Sylvia placed that ad in the New York Times, it was an act of love for her brother. She was frustrated by the diagnosis he'd been given. He'd been struggling with MS. And so what did she do? She did what human beings do and said, I must take action. I have to do something. And so, out of love for doing something better for her brother, she put a call out. 50 people responded to her. They then raised some money, funded some research, created an organization that now has, given birth to multiple other organizations, funded more than $1 billion worth of research, has incredible programs, services, and advocacy work we do as an organization, again, all birthed out of a moment of love. And, one of the things that I think about as a role of CEO is that is the through line with so much of what we do. When people go out and they do a walk event, they walk out of love for someone in their family that is affected, or their caregiver. They love, it's active love. And to me, that kind of concept of connection, inspiration, being there for each other is the root of who we are as a National MS Society. And I'll say as a society CEO, I want to just create space for more of that, more of the ability of people to reflect that. And then my specific actions in sort of the next 90 days is two things. One is going to continue focus on our mission delivery of our scientific programs, our programs that support activism, advocacy that I know is so involved with. And then, we have some senior leadership positions that I'll be moving quickly to fill, and then really focusing in on, growing our revenue as an organization so that we can expand our mission impact. Those are some quick wins, but really sustaining and growing our ability to deliver on the incredible mission of the National MS Society is what I'm aiming for.
In your previous role as the Society's Chief Advocacy Services and Science Officer, you've played a key role in so many important research initiatives. Two that come to mind are the International Progressive MS Alliance and the International Advisory Committee on Clinical Trials in Multiple Sclerosis. Now that your responsibilities are so much broader than they've been, do you anticipate maintaining an active role in these initiatives?
That's a great question. So the short answer is obviously as the CEO, I'll have a wider scope of responsibility and, the leaders, I'll play a different role in terms of providing international leadership related to the Progressive MS Alliance. I'll assume the role of being the chair of the executive committee, almost the board of the Progressive MS Alliance. And then also within the context of the International Advisory Committee, continuing to ensure that the work we're doing around updating and revising the diagnostic criteria for MS, exploring how we describe MS, what we call as the clinical course descriptors, are all bodies of work that I led and that we will transition to other leaders. But, as CEO, of this organization, I am firmly committed to our global reach and impact, and will continue to be involved in really working with the CEOs of the other MS societies around the world of how we, as a movement of leaders, create the space and conditions for us to drive the science, but also improve the lives of everybody affected by MS. And so I'll use the platform of the CEO of the society to do what I've done in the past, bring people together, articulate a vision for how we can change the journey of MS, and to work collectively to change the parameters of what it means to live with MS. But more importantly, one thing that I shared as I was going through the interview process with the search committee is, my conviction that a cure truly is within our reach. When we think about the progress we've made over the last now almost 80 years since, again, Sylvia placed that ad in the New York Times, we can diagnose MS so much faster than ever before. It's gone from years to months to sometimes weeks. We've seen the development of more than 20 treatments for MS. And, that is just remarkable. We have our first treatment for progressive MS. We've seen, the life with MS has also changed for so many people in terms of the programs, the support, the services people can access. And then our advocacy efforts, both within the United States, but globally, around ensuring access, ensuring that people are able to get access to those treatments. I think Ms. Lowry, if she were here today, would be, it is amazing what's been happening. And that now our next frontier really is, what do we need to do to identify who's at risk of developing MS, and can we intervene before they've even shown any symptoms? Big goals, big ambition, but I think that's what we have to strive for. The Progressive MS Alliance, I think, is a great example where we said we must do something about progressive MS. We rallied the community, created a structure by which groups and people could come together to drive research, elevated the profile. Now progressive MS is on the map. We don't have enough treatments. I'm just going to say that out loud. We need more treatments for progressive MS, and we need to understand what it's going to take to stop progression. But, I think you only achieve ambitious things if you set ambitious goals. And we need to set an ambitious goal that we can spot MS as early as it can be so that we can intervene and stop it. And then also focus in on how we transform the journey of MS today so that people don't progress.
Well, I'm glad you brought up the next frontier, because a moment ago, we talked about your priorities for the first 100 days. So now I'd like to take a longer view. Can you share your vision for the National MS Society 5 years from now, say in 2029? What does that landscape look like?
Oh, that's a great question. So what I hope we can say as a result of the collective action of the National MS Society, the hundreds of thousands of volunteers, the more than 700 staff that we have who are working together, and then my colleagues in the global MS movement together, I want us to be able to say within the next 5 years that we've identified, those elements that are the predictors of someone potentially developing MS, and we are able to diagnose them quickly and get them on a treatment as quickly as possible. I want us to be in a place where, we have the ability that if someone hears the words, "you have MS," that they're able to connect with an organization, get the resources they need within that first hour, first day, go where they need to go to get what they need when they need it along their journey. Because the journey with MS evolves from the minute you hear those words forward. And I want us to be able to be there and be present with individuals all along the way so that they have what they need when they need it. Recognize that people need different things at different ways along the journey. I want us to have have been able to make progress around ensuring that people are able to get the treatments they need when they need to get them. That is, that the barriers for access to medications are still just a huge challenge. And I think we need to continue to focus in on that. Another area, I think in 2029, making progress around people being able to have access to the doctor they need to be able to have the treatment they need. We live if you're listening to this from other parts of the world, I'm in the United States. The United States is a big country where many parts of the country don't have an MS specialist, and people need to go distances to get treatment and care. I'd love to see a world where a person can get to the specialist they need, but then they can also be in the community where they live, getting access to a doctor who knows enough about MS to provide them the care they need, and can also link them to a doctor if they need it for that specialty care that doctor may not be able to provide them. But that we're imagining a world like that. And then the other aspect of the world that I want to imagine is that we've changed the journey of MS so that MS, the impacts of MS on people have been minimized. We're already starting to see that with, people diagnosed today having a different journey than individuals, say, diagnosed 10 or 15 years ago. But imagine with that progress, we're able to do more of that. And then lastly, I think, one of the other areas is that, one of the emerging areas is progression and understanding why people progress, even if they haven't had a relapse in 10 years. And in 5 years, I want us to be able to have those tools and tests that a doctor can use to be able to predict, okay, this is where you are. This is what we're going to do. Here's how we're going to adjust your treatment plan. All of that will take people and commitment, of individuals coming out to support the National MS Society or their home MS organization. It'll take the research community coming together to do this. It also will take leaders within the movement, myself as a CEO, my peer CEOs of other MS organizations, the scientific leaders coming together to say that we as a community must do something together to be able to achieve these ends, and think about where do we collaborate, where do we partner to be able to do that. And I feel incredibly privileged to be able to serve in this role of bringing people together as the society's CEO.
Beginning in 2020, there was a major trend throughout the private sector and the nonprofit sector to adopt diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. And just as quickly as many of those initiatives appeared, it seems that over the past 12 months, many have disappeared. But that hasn't been the case at the National MS Society, where the concepts of diversity, equity, and inclusion have become fundamental to what the MS Society is. How would you describe the importance of diversity, equity, and inclusion in the National MS Society?
Yeah, no, it's a really important question. And I think, when I think about it, I think about it in different sort of spheres. So the first place I would start with is I come at this, and we come at this as an organization from the premise of, first, anybody can be diagnosed with MS. So since anybody can be diagnosed with MS, we must be an organization that is for all people affected by multiple sclerosis. That's just an absolute given of who we are. We also, as an organization, have a responsibility to really correct some of our past practices where we described as MS being a disease largely of white individuals, women living with MS, just flat wrong. And I have shared in the Black MS Experience Summit last year how, those hurtful narratives about who gets MS and why, and some of the limitations that we place on that are things that we as an organization must reconcile to, and all of us that are MS or leaders in the MS movement must address and reconcile to that, with an eye towards moving forward to being the organization that is for everyone affected by the disease, having programs for everyone affected by the disease, and also understanding how MS affects different communities in different ways and addressing some of those gaps in socioeconomic challenges that really get in the way of individuals being able to get the best care that they need. And so we are firmly committed to continuing to be an organization that is focused on, creating, a diverse, equitable, and inclusive movement for all people affected by MS. That's the core of who I am, and believe that we must continue to be that, both as a movement and as an organization.
Research has shown that members of underserved racial and ethnic communities can often experience a more severe MS disease course, not necessarily because of genetic differences, but as a consequence of the social determinants of health. What can the National MS Society do to change the course of these mighty cultural rivers that have embedded themselves into our society for literally hundreds of years? It feels like a pretty heavy lift.
It is a lift, and not one that we do overnight or over 1 week or even 1 year. But it is something that requires sustained, in my view, ongoing commitment. So the first is what we're talking about here is shining a light on the fact that social determinants of health and inequities in society and economics can create conditions that for one set of individuals leads to a worse outcome with the disease, whereas others who don't have some of those circumstances have different outcomes. We as a society, but also as a country, need to address those challenges. What we could do as a society, besides highlighting them, through the work of our healthcare access team and our advocacy, can advocate for changes in policy and educating physicians so that physicians know what to look for, and to think about, and when they're seeing patients, consider how social determinants of health maybe affecting, how an individual is living with MS. It can also give us heightened sensitivity in terms of understanding what do we need to do, particularly with the physician community, to elevate their insight and understanding in terms of how to approach that. It also means, we also, are implementing things like, cultural awareness training for some of our physicians so that they can understand how to move through that. Another aspect is, partnering with organizations to really go out and understand, so what does this look like in the United States, and to move beyond anecdote to actually have data-informed decision-making and program development and planning. We have one project that our healthcare access team is doing now in partnership with Genentech, one of our terrific partners, looking at what we call the Neurology Deserts Project, to understand where are there gaps in neurologists and where are there gaps in service and care, and what then and using that information then to both advocate, think about our program development, and also understand what information do we need to give to people in different areas so that they can access the resources they need. This, I will say, John, this requires sustained commitment by all of us. I think this is not, these challenges, as you point, didn't develop overnight. They don't solve themselves overnight. And it takes consistent, disciplined engagement, shining a light, not being shy to say, we must do something about this. And also, I believe it's a responsibility we have to address this. We have a responsibility to do something. Just as Sylvia Lari, when she placed that ad, took responsibility and said, we are going to create, an organization that then led to what we know as the National MS Society. Where we are today in 2024, I believe we have a responsibility and an obligation to take this on and to not shy away from the challenges.
Over the past decade, philanthropy in America has changed, and perhaps that's become most clear in post-pandemic America. Major nonprofit organizations, including patient advocacy organizations, are finding it more challenging to raise funds. Now, the National MS Society is the largest private funder of MS research in the world, and the ability to fund research or support services like the MS Navigator program, and even the Society's important advocacy work, is dependent upon fundraising. So does the MS Society need to refocus or revisit its fundraising strategies to more closely align with the realities of philanthropy in 2024?
It's a great question. So let me take it at different layers. So first off, I say yes, systemically, you look out over the environment, giving is down. But here's what I also know. Particularly, again, to your listeners who are not in the United States, I'll apologies, but I'm going to talk about the United States for a second. People in our country are generous. There are hundreds of billions of dollars a year given to a variety of different philanthropic activities. And I know, people in our country are generous people, and they are around the world. But there is incredible amounts of generosity, and that individuals also need to be generous because they're inspired by something that they want to give to, and they're excited and motivated to give to whatever their charity and philanthropy is of choice. And so when I think about the work we need to do at the National MS Society, first to acknowledge, yes, we have similarly been challenged by giving patterns, giving trends. Individuals are not giving as much. They're giving as, they have a number of different places they're going to. And one of the focus areas as CEO that I have over the next, 2 years will be on addressing our revenue challenges, implementing new fundraising strategies to grow our revenue, strengthening our existing, revenue channels so that, those are our walks, our bikes, and our other channels so that people are inspired, excited to give, because we need people to support the National MS Society for us to be able to deliver on our mission. I've described our organization as a fundraising organization with a noble mission. And I really believe that to my core, is that to be able to support the advocacy that we want to do, to support the training of the next generation of fellows, to deliver, programs and support, and then also importantly to drive our scientific agenda, that requires individuals supporting the society so that we can deliver on that mission. That's all part of, who I am. And, I'm going to be very focused on that, and really thinking through with our chief development officer, what are the new ways? What are the new channels? People are looking for different ways to give. They may not want to ride a bike. They might want to give through a donor advised fund, participate in a leadership event. What I'll say to your audience is that there is that within the National MS Society, there are a lot of different ways for individuals to support the work of the society, and that, we need people to engage with us, to support the society, for us to be able to grow, and to do that, again, consistent with consistency, discipline, so that we can, amplify our mission impact.
When you began your career in the National MS Society, if my arithmetic is right, there were, I think, 3 approved disease-modifying therapies for MS.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
Today, we have more than 20. An awful lot has changed for the better. And as technology continues to provide new tools, the pace of scientific discovery has never been as rapid as what we're seeing today. So you've already started to answer this question earlier, but I'm going to ask you to dust off your crystal ball now and share with us how you see both MS research and clinical practice evolving in the near to midterm future.
Yeah, no, it is remarkable. And I think, you're right. When I started at the MS Society, we had Avonex, Copaxone, and Rebif were the treatments that are available. And then soon after that, we had I forget Betaseron in there as well. So we had 4, and then we added Tysabri not long after. So really, incredible that we went from having no treatments to having some treatments, and now, to your point, it's not unheard of. I'm sure you've had the same experience with somebody will be talking with me and said, I was diagnosed with relapsing MS 8 years ago, and I haven't had a single relapse. That is just really amazing, because when I started the MS Society, that, there was often, people's, I've had a relapse here and there. So that the landscape has shifted, and the ability for individuals to start strong, what we call high efficacy treatments that interrupt the immune system and prevent relapses is remarkable, and really transformative. But we cannot rest on our laurels. To your point, we have got to keep driving. And so what to your point, what I think we need those tests. I don't know what the tests are, the combination of tests that allow us to spot that a person who is at risk of developing MS has MS before they've shown any clinical symptoms, before they've shown problems with their eye or walking or stuff like that. Because most people will tell you, most clinicians will tell you when they make the diagnosis of MS in a person, they've probably had MS for, maybe 6 months or longer to a year, that they've had these symptoms that were being ignored. We need to be able to get that set of tests. And to do that, we're going to need the research community focusing in on, what's happening in a person who's develops MS, but right before, not year before they're diagnosed. And I think with big data technology and the tools we have, we can actually get at that. Then the next piece we need to do is we need to have even better treatments than we have today. And I do not, for your audience, not at all disparaging the treatments we have today. The treatments we have today are just remarkable and have been transformational, but we can do better. We can have, I'd like to see a future where we have treatments where a person can be given the diagnosis of MS, have a profile done of them where the doctors say, okay, here's where you are in your disease journey. Here's what we're thinking. And we're going to prescribe this treatment that you can now take that'll have minimal side effects, that stops the disease in its tracks. And that, you don't have to worry about this or that adverse event and different aspects of life with MS with the current treatments that for some people are what we need to manage. In some diseases they call shrinking the footprint of the disease in a person's life. I would like us to be able to shrink that footprint. And then the other piece is this notion of that a person can progress even though they've had no relapses and no new lesions. That's real. You've talked about it on your show several times. I know you and I have talked about it. We've got to crack that nut. And being able to have those predictors that say, okay, the disease seems to be progressing a little bit. Let's get at that. And let's start you now on this treatment, which might be tackling that aspect of the disease that's contributing to progression. A little bit longer term, also those remyelinating treatments, getting those remyelinating treatments going and moving are really what I hope we can see. My really aspirational area that I like to get at is, for those who live with progressive MS today, that we have therapies, whether they're drug treatments, physical therapy, rehabilitation, a combination of all of those that can restore what people have lost as a result of their progressive MS. And it really is important to me, and you and I have had these conversations in the context of the Progressive MS Alliance, is that we cannot leave our community of individuals who have lived with progressive MS behind as the science moves so fast and quickly. It is, the scientist in me says that the technology and what we have today is absolutely amazing, and it is going to transform MS in the future. But there are people that live with MS today that we cannot leave behind. And my commitment as the society CEO is that we are here for all people affected by MS across the dimensions and the continuum of the disease.
Hear, hear. Well, Tim, I'll share with you what I've already shared with my listeners. I don't believe there was anyone anywhere who was better suited to become the MS Society's next president and CEO. So once again, congratulations on your new role. And as always, I appreciate you taking the time from what I can only imagine is an incredibly hectic schedule to talk with me today.
It's an honor, John, and I am just awed and humbled by the privilege to serve as the society's, I think, 6th CEO at this point. And to your listeners, I'm just grateful for their support of you and our community, and just reiterate my commitment that we're going to solve this disease, and it'll be a privilege to solve that with you and our community going forward.
That's going to wrap up this episode of Real Talk MS. Real Talk MS is powered by the National MS Society, and you can share this episode of the podcast by letting your friends or family members know that all they have to do is point their web browser at realtalkms.com/361. You'll find that link in today's show notes, so you can easily copy and paste it right into an email or a text. And if you have a minute, I hope you'll pay a visit to the Apple App Store or the Google Play Store and download the free Real Talk MS app for your iOS or Android smartphone or tablet. It's the best way for us to stay connected. The app will automatically download the latest episode of RealTalk MS. You'll be able to access any of our past episodes. You'll be able to save your favorite episodes. And it's a great way for me to share bonus content with you. The app is free, so I hope you'll download it today. I'm John Strum. Thanks for listening. Stay safe and make healthy choices.